This is the second time I've had to do this video because my mic was not working on the last one. So hopefully everything will go okay on this one. When I started researching the IRS stuff, it became very apparent, and if you've watched any of my videos, you know this, it has become very apparent that definitions are everything, that you can't just assume what is being done is legal, and you also cannot listen to your public servants tell you that they're legal. You literally have to go read the law yourself and figure out whether they define the words the way you think they define them and what exactly is being said. Now, there's a thing even more than property or income tax that drives me crazy. Well, I won't say more, but equally drives me crazy that I can't figure out how they're doing, and that's property tax. I feel like property taxes and you know, having to go and ask permission for every single thing you do on your property, that's a whole nother side issue. But I feel like the property tax, coming and annually taxing my property and then taking my property without due process and without any criminal actions, being able to take my property and sell it on the courthouse steps by the sheriff, are unconstitutional at every single level that could possibly exist. And so after I realized what was going on with the income tax stuff, I decided that I wanted to go dig into property taxes a little bit better and try to understand how they were getting around the constitutional protections that we have and forcing us to pay a tax that we're not getting any kind of privilege from. Normally, if you're going to pay a tax, there's something associated with it so that, you know, you're getting some privilege for paying that tax, like the roads being paved or the courthouse being open or whatever it happens to be. In the case of property taxes, the counties take our taxes. They just make up numbers and charge us taxes. And then they take that money and they give it to the education system that we may not even have any kids in school. We may have to homeschool our kids, which is what I do. I'm homeschooling my child. So I have to pay for the homeschooling and for everybody else to go and send their kids through this shitty ass public school system. So I not only have a problem with the fact that my money is going toward the public school system, but I have a problem with what the public school system is actually turning out. And so you're forcing me to have to pay for something that I completely and utterly disagree with. So I just don't understand how that's happening. And so I don't know, and I'll tell you at the end of the video what I'm planning to do with all this, but I'm right now I'm trying to get answers. I'm trying to determine what is legal, what is not legal, how is this stuff supposed to be working, and what are my requirements actually supposed to be. So to do this, I started with the Georgia Constitution, and I read all of the Georgia Constitution. Then I went back and reread the parts that were related to property and got as good of an understanding as I could on what my rights are and what the government's rights are. And then I went to the actual real estate, or the actual like it's called ad valorem property taxes in the Georgia Code. Now, if you live in a different state, you're going to have to go do this on your own for your state. I'm only giving you this from the perspective of the state of Georgia. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through my affidavit, because I am sending the county an affidavit. And I'll go ahead and tell you what I'm planning to do. I am planning to sue the county for a multitude of things. And when I get to that point, I'll show you the court case and what I'm actually doing, because I'm still learning what I'm going to do at the other end. But I feel like I have completely proven that they are violating our constitutional rights by all of this stuff. And so I want to kind of go through it and explain it. So I'm sending an affidavit saying what my truth is, and then giving them the opportunity to refute my truth if they have a different explanation for what it is that I'm reading. All right, so I'm not going to give you the code sections and all this, because hopefully you can read it on the video. I'm just going to jump to the definition so we can get through this as quick as possible. All right, so personal property. this is out of the Georgia codes, means all tangible personal property and intangible personal property. Okay. So personal property is both intangible and tangible. Then it goes on to define what tangible personal property is. And tangible personal property means personal property. You have to love the government. They define things with the word that they're actually supposed to be defining. Tangible personal property means personal property which may be seen, weighed, measured, felt, or touched. I'd love for them to explain to me the difference between felt and touched. I guess you can feel things without touching them. I don't know how that works, but in any case, that's what tangible personal property is. And I'm only focusing on tangible because I'm really looking at real estate as my example. So now we get to taxable property. Now notice right away that this does not say taxable personal property. It just says taxable property. So we've started this whole conversation out referring to this as tangible personal property, and now all of a sudden, and personal property, and now we've jumped to just something that's called taxable property. So taxable property is all real property. No definition for real property, and you could assume that it's real estate, but I'll show you some examples later that kind of bring that into question. But it says all real property, including but not limited to leasehold, interest less than fee, and personal property. Now, we've already defined personal property as tangible personal property. And so this has just brought something called real property, including. So I'm kind of feeling like maybe real property is a bigger word, and it encompasses more than just personal property, which is very strange given the fact that personal property is everything I can see and touch. So I don't really know exactly what real property is at this point. I could assume it's real estate, but that doesn't make sense because personal property already covers, or the definition for tangible personal property already covers land. So I'm a little confused at this point. The next thing that we get to is how to assess tangible property. Now we were talking about taxable property, and it talked about real property. Now we're talking about assessment of tangible property. So now, is this personal tangible property, or is this some other thing that we're talking about? But in any case, it says, except as otherwise provided in this code section, taxable tangible property. Again, we're not talking about personal taxable or tangible personal property. Now we're just talking about tangible property, and it's taxable. So we're a little confused now, because earlier, if you go back up here, personal property is all tangible personal property. Tangible personal property is all tangible personal property. It means personal property, which can be seen, weighed, or touched. Now we're talking about taxable property, which is all real property and personal property. So this says that it shall be liable to taxation and shall be taxed. So they have included our personal property into this taxable property definition, and something called real property, which again we're not real sure about. But now they're talking about assessment of tangible property, and it says, except as otherwise provided in this code section, taxable tangible property. Well, they've already told us that taxable property is up here. Why are they talking about taxable tangible now? Because taxable property, like, this really doesn't make any sense, because think about this. Taxable personal property, this is what it says, all personal property. All personal property includes tangible and intangible. This then says taxable tangible property. Well, we know that all personal property is taxable because of the other two definitions. And now they're saying that it's taxable tangible, but now we don't know if we're talking about our personal property or if we're talking about something else entirely. We really don't know. But here's something else that goes on, and it says 40% of its fair market value. So this is saying that assessment of tangible property, no real definition there, but it says that it is fair market value. It's 40% of its fair market value. They go on to define what fair market value is. All right, now let's see. Okay, before we get into fair market value, I split off here because I wanted to tell you what the intent of this code section is. It says the intent and purpose of the tax laws of this state are to have all property and subjects of taxation returned. Okay, now here's a question. Are they talking about me physically returning my property to the county and then they're going to retax it and sell it back or give it back to me? I don't think that's what they mean, but that is a question. It's a legitimate question because they haven't defined the word return. Or are they talking about us having to file a tax return with our personal property on it with fair market value? So we have to look at fair market value. And now they are requiring us to return that property at fair market value. Okay. So now we get down to another section and it says each return of taxable property shall be signed or by or for the person responsible for filing the return and shall contain or be verified by the following written declaration. So they actually give us a declaration, an oath that we have to sign that we're telling the truth. So now we're not actually talking about having to file, just give them a return. We actually have to give them a return with penalty of going to jail, which is the next section. A person convicted of this offense shall be $1,000 fine or imprisonment not less than 1 year or more than 5 years or both. So there is a massive penalty on filling out this return and making a mistake on it. So we've got to be very, very careful about this. And I argue that it violates my Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights to protection of papers and not bearing witness against myself, because I know at the point that I'm signing this document that I could go to jail for it. So to me, I should be able to plead the Fifth and say, no, I'm not giving you something that I know that you could use against me in a court of law. So just saying. So now that code section we were just in continues, and it says that so if you look up here, it says it must be returned, and then it goes on to say at the value which would be realized from the cash sale, but not the forced sale of the property and subjects as such property and subjects are usually sold except as otherwise provided in this chapter. So they're saying that it must be returned at the fair market value of what it should be sold at if you were to do it, but you have to do a return on that stuff. So now we get into another code section that says all property shall be returned for taxation at its fair market value. Well, they've already kind of said that up here in the other sections, but this goes on to clarify. All property shall be returned for taxation at its fair market value. Okay. So fair market value, and this is all their definitions. Fair market value of property means the amount a knowledgeable buyer would pay for the property and a willing seller would accept for the property at an arm's length bona fide sale. And it goes on to say, notwithstanding any other provision of this chapter to the contrary, the transaction amount of the most recent arm's length bona fide sale in any year. So to be clear, this does not say the most recent arm's length bona fide sale from last year. It says from any year. The most recent from any year shall be the maximum allowable fair market value for the next taxable year. And it doesn't say for next year, for the year after you bought it. And it doesn't say for what you bought it for. It says the most recent arm's length sale is what they're to use for the fair market value. It says nothing about appraising the property, looking at what you've done to the property, and increasing its value based on currency. It says nothing about any of that. So we go on, and it gets even more interesting. An arm's length bona fide sale means a transaction which has occurred. Again, arm's length bona fide sale, a transaction which has occurred in good faith, without fraud or deceit, carried out by two unrelated parties as a willing buyer and willing seller, each acting in his or her own self-interest, whatever. So the point here is that an arm's length bona fide sale is something that has happened in the past. A fair market value is based on an arm's length bona fide sale. So how is the county determining the value of my property in the future based on the sale of my neighbor's property? It's a mystery. And it's in violation of their own code section. So we haven't even gotten to the Constitution yet. We're only talking about their codes and their definitions and what they actually say. So the question is, how are they doing this? And to me, the answer is because you're stupid enough to go along with it, because the code, the law clearly does not cover what they're actually doing at the county level. So the next problem we have, and this is just something for you to actually consider. And I'm going to read my sentence just because it says exactly what I want to say. Another issue that must be considered is that our state, Georgia, is operating unconstitutionally by allowing something other than gold and silver to be used to pay debts. Now, remember, the federal Constitution says that the states cannot use anything but gold and silver to pay debts. They can't allow it. All right, so because the government has forced us to use fiat currency that has no backing and no reserves, and because that currency is constantly being manipulated and inflated, it would be unfair for you to base the value of my home on the more recent sale of someone else's property, whether or not it's similar to mine or not. Now, think about it. The dollar in 1970 is worth a whole lot more than what it's worth today. And I buy a house in 1970 for $30,000, which, by the way, people were buying homes for $30,000 back then. You take that $30,000 house, if I pay taxes at all, which the more I get into this, the more I think this whole thing's a scam. But if I pay taxes at all, it should be on the most recent bona fide sale back from 1970, not from whatever you think the currency is worth today, because you're inflating the value of my property based on you inflating or deflating the value of my currency, because you're printing more and more and more of this stuff. So the value of the currency you're forcing me to use is no longer worth as much, but yet you keep raising my taxes. So is just something worth talking about. And then I also go into the fact that BlackRock and other companies work directly with the Fed in order to buy property above fair market value. So now my neighbor sells their house, but it's not at fair market value. It's actually above fair market value for the bank to take ownership of it and inflate the value of my property. And now all of my taxes go up again because of these types of transactions. All of it is illegal as hell. So then we go on. This is the Georgia Constitution. It says all taxation shall be uniform upon the same class of subjects within the territorial limits of the authority levying the tax. Uniform. Uniform is defined as consistent at all times, not different at different times or places, applicable to all places or to all divisions of the country. Now, we'll just take the state of Georgia. This leads me to believe, and I don't see how you could misconstrue this to mean something else, but all property, if you're going to have an yearly ad valorem tax, and by the way, these taxes are supposed to, by the definitions or by the constitutions themselves, they're supposed to be used to pay the public debt. They're not supposed to be used to create school systems that I homeschool my child, and I have to pay for that and pay for the public school system for other people to send their kids to school. And I don't, and that's what my property taxes go toward is to pay for these corrupt school systems. And I have a personal problem with that thing, and you're forcing me to have to pay for it. And that's to me, it's unconstitutional. It's absolutely crazy. But now what we have is we have the Constitution saying it's supposed to be a uniform tax. Now you could argue that, hey, if you tax it based on the last arm's length sale, and that's what the tax is based on from then on, then it's uniform because everybody pays the same tax on the same type of property based on, but to me, it's based on the value they purchased it for, which is still not uniform. To me, a uniform tax would be everybody pays $500 or everybody pays $1,000 that owns property, and that's the end of it. But another problem with that is them placing, and here's the thing, I don't think I have like a huge problem with them placing a levy against the property, but I do have a problem with them coming and taking the property if the levy is not taken care of. That to me is unconstitutional. I mean, it should prevent me from being able to sell the property unless it gets paid, sure, whatever. But you shouldn't be able to come take my property without due process and without me having committed any crime. This is a tax imposed on me, the whole thing is ridiculous. And by the way, they're forcing me to return it, which this is an even more amazing thing to me, is if you were going to take the position that the state of Georgia, or any state for that matter, had the ability to tax all property. When I buy something at the store, pay for gas, I pay a tax. I have to pay it. I'm buying the thing. I'm getting a privilege from what it is. I don't have to buy it. And I get that privilege of driving on the road. It pays for the road, whatever. I have to pay that tax. When you come along and just make up a tax, like a property tax, and you give it the value, you being the county, you give it the value, and then you get the benefits of that money, and then you take that money and you give it to other things like flock cameras and school, tracking cameras and all this invasive stuff, then you're going against my rights and taking my personal property to benefit yourself. And it's also interesting to note, I don't know if I have the Supreme Court case, but it is something that you should go look up if you haven't seen it. Let me get to, let's see, it's up here, court cases, and I think, is it, no, I think I may have put it in here. And it would be somebody versus United States. No, it was against the county. Who was that court case? Anyway, it was a court case that literally just went through last Friday through the Supreme Court, and the government lost. They had to give the guy his money back. Because what had happened is they had passed a law at the county level saying that the county could do something. They could charge a fee for somebody as a building code. And the Supreme Court ruled that having a law that said that they could do this doesn't change the fact that they can't put a tax on someone or charge a fee to someone just because the county wants to. That the person that paid that fee didn't get any benefit from that fee, and therefore it was illegal, and so they had to give him his money back. So there are court cases that back some of this stuff up. I don't remember the case, and I don't want to take a bunch of time trying to find it. So the Georgia Constitution goes on again to say that subject to the conditions and limitations specified by law, each of the following types of property may be classified as separate classes of property for ad valorem property tax purposes. All right, so essentially what they're saying is each type of property that they've identified is subject to a special ad valorem tax, which is, again, tax on value, not tax on an annual basis. All right, so we go on to say the definition for ad valorem, again, according to value, a tax imposed on the value of property. It's not something that says anything about annual. This and also up here in this section, I want to read. So just look at this. It says, specified by law, each of the following types of property may be classified as a separate class of property for ad valorem property tax purposes, and different rates, methods, and assessment dates may be provided for such properties. And this is tangible real property. Here's a question, and this is what I was alluding to earlier. If real property is talking about real estate, then why are they adding tangible to the front of it? Because how could you possibly have intangible real estate? This brings into further question what real property actually is talking about. I know they want us to think it's real estate, but through their own definitions and lack of definitions, it makes it extremely difficult to conclusively determine that. We got the ad valorem. All right, so then it says all tangible personal property of the taxpayer, except motor vehicles, trailers, and mobile homes, shall be exempt from all ad valorem taxation if the actual fair market value, there's that term again, of the total amount of taxable tangible personal property owned by the taxpayer within the county does not exceed $7,500. Now they use this to specify that the total amount, they use this to tell you that your pants and your hat and your boots and everything else are not taxable in this section, even though they are tangible personal property. They've used that definition to say that, and then they use this definition to say that you don't have to pay a tax on anything that's less than $7,500, except that's not what this says. This actually, if you look at it again, it says the total amount of taxable tangible personal property. So this isn't asking what you paid for your boots or your pants or your hat. It's asking for the total amount of personal property that you have that I don't really know. The whole thing is so confusing that it makes your head hurt. But you get the point. It's total. It's not, so it doesn't exclude anything if you have a total, and almost all of us have more than $7,500 of furniture in our house. So according to this, they should be taxing us at the fair market value, which is what you paid for it, not what it's worth later on, but what you paid for it. It's ridiculous. And so this is a section that I add in here just to be funny, because in the code section on farmland, they have a thing in here that says the property must be owned by one or more natural or naturalized citizens. And my question for them is, they don't provide a definition for what a natural citizen is. A natural person is a human being, but I don't know what a natural citizen is. And my question for them is, are they saying if natural means natural person, which is a human being, and they've said or a naturalized citizen, are they saying a naturalized person is not actually a natural person? They're not a human being? I mean, what exactly is being communicated here? That it doesn't make any sense. So the last thing is, and this is related to miscellaneous stuff like airplanes and boats and those kind of things. It says this particular section of the Constitution lists out types of property that have been set aside for the particular ad valorem taxes. Airplanes and boats are not part of that list, but are included in section 48.516, which indicates that they get taxed whether they're below $7,500 or not. Even if we were to assume an annual tax was due, the currently used methods are unconstitutional for violating the Constitution's uniformity clause and the definitions provided for fair market value and arm's length sale. So this entire property tax section of at least in Georgia, is a complete and utter mess. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's not uniform. It doesn't apply fair market value by the definition supplied by the code. Property taxes includes literally everything that we buy if it totals more than $7,500. They're requiring under perjury, under risk of perjury, they're requiring me to file a return, supposedly requiring me to file a return, violating my Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. There's so much stuff going on here with this property tax stuff that I still, to this day, believe that it is not legal, it's not lawful for them to charge property taxes on our real estate. We already pay taxes when we buy all this stuff, and it just seems completely ridiculous that we continue to pay that property tax. And this goes for cars and boats and everything. To have an annual forcing of a return in order to tax. And I'll close this with something else. Because the county itself is arbitrarily creating these taxes, and there is no return that I'm filing with the county to tell them the fair market value of my property. I also contend that they are operating outside of the law by filing a return for me, because all their code is based on a return. You saw that up in the earlier section. It's based on a return. If there is no return, how are they continuing to evaluate the value of this thing at this fair market value and keeping it legal? It just doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to continue going down this road and see how it ends up. I'll continue to post updates as I proceed. But at this particular point, I am just as convinced that income taxes are illegal as hell as property taxes fit in the same category.